What's up, guys? Mr. Dan here, back again. Today I'm coming to you with a book review of a actor often associated with Hammer films. A lot of times when we think of Hammer, we think of Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, the director Terence Fisher. But really, on the short list is an actor who often had smaller roles, the great character actor Michael Ripper. So I just finished this book, Michael Ripper Unmasked, by Derek Pykett, who actually knew Michael Ripper. Sat down with him many times. Accompanied him to a Hammer reunion at one point. Interviewed a lot of other actors that appeared in Hammer films. An actor himself, well suited to write this biography, of Michael Ripper. I read this in one day. At the end, there's an essay and then some fan letters, which is cool. That actually includes some fan letters in here, and where people talk about their experiences meeting him at conventions. The convention scene back then wasn't what it was today, but they did have the occasional convention. So some people do have fond memories of meeting him. And so I read everything except the last little bits in one day. And I was juggling 2 grandchildren. So this is a quick read. Lots of pictures, which is a good thing. I'm not saying that the pictures are negative or a filler, but you get to see anytime they mention a play or a movie, there's usually a picture that goes with it. So this is a very quick read, but a very interesting read, and really a look at the times as well. There he is. Just a lot of times, as I was rounding out or filling out my Hammer collection, if a film had Michael Ripper in it, I would tend to pick that one over another one, because I mentioned this months ago, but I'm actually compiling a list of my top 10 Michael Ripper roles, and I know there are a few other YouTubers who have done similar things, so I have avoided watching their videos because I want to have my own list. But yeah, there's a lot to consider because he had a long career. So look for that video eventually. And I apologize for the mess behind me. I'm still reorganizing this room. Anyway, yeah, let's get to it. Really good book. It's a quick read, like I said. It gives you enough of his personal life to give you a feeling of what made him into the man he was as an actor. And they talk about the progression of his career. They don't touch on every single thing he's ever been in. For example, they leave out his appearance in Journey into the Unknown, which was a Hammer TV show in the late 60s, where he actually appeared with his second wife, Catherine Finn. So they don't mention every single thing, because that would be almost exhausting, rather. This is exhaustive, even though it's short, but it's not exhausting. It's a very nice read. Anyway, let's just start at the beginning. They start with his personal life. Unfortunately, for a guy that often seems so happy and, chipper, and had a little spark in his eye, a little twinkle, he had a very difficult childhood. He was beaten routinely by his father for no good reason, essentially. He actually suffered a really horrible beating at school once, only because he got kicked out of class because he knew too many answers, and the teacher got frustrated with him. And then the headmaster saw him and gave him a real beating. Which is just a shame. So in that case, his mom went into the school and gave the guy what for. But at home, she just basically sat back and let the beatings happen. Now, his father was a disciplinarian. He was also a speech therapist. So he would make young Michael enter into these elocution contests, these speech contests. And which is maybe the only positive thing that he got out of his relationship with his father, because, he had this great voice. So he would do well in those, and I think there were some early attempts to get him involved in acting, but he resisted. But when he realized that he can leave the house at 15 and be enrolled in an acting school, like a high school that was also an acting school, he jumped at the chance to get away from his father. And one of the connections that they talked about early on was his father's friendship with Alistair Sim. If you remember the classic, to me at least, Christmas Carol, he plays Ebenezer Scrooge. So a well-respected actor. he did run into Alistair Sim many times during his career, and he kind of got the impression that Alistair Sim was kind of helping behind the scenes, guiding his career a bit. Maybe even his father was doing that as well. And sadly, he never really reconciled with his father. He was married 3 times. They don't really go into a lot of detail. His second wife, they were together years before they got married, and then they divorced in about 6 years. But that was Catherine Finn, who appeared in movies like The Deadly Bees with him, and also that episode that I was talking about, and The Creeping Flesh, which also starred Peter Cushing. They don't really go into details that much about it. He was very close to his daughter, so he would actually visit with his daughter and his first wife, and it was very amicable, you know. For a lot of actors at the time, he found some work in the theater. Then he made some early films, which I really want to track some of these down and check them out to see a young Michael Ripper. And then he went back into the theater for about 7 years, and he was based in Dublin. And that's when World War II broke out. He went to the embassy, British embassy, and said, "What do I do? Do I go home?" And they said, "We know where you are. You stay here. We'll contact you if we need you." So he stayed there for most of the rest of the war. And unfortunately, at some point, he had a pretty serious operation on his thyroid, and it affected his speech, and he was no longer able to project. So he started to gravitate more towards movies. So he started to go into films. He crossed paths with people like Alan Napier, who would play Alfred in the Batman TV series. I believe there was a director-actor named Robert Montgomery, I believe that's his name, who actually encouraged him to maybe try Hollywood. And later on, Christopher Lee would do the same thing, and he never made that move. He decided he just didn't want to. So it would have been interesting to see what kind of roles he would have had if he had done so. And then, of course, it talks about his association with Hammer and how he begins to work with Hammer, and he eventually appears in something like 33 Hammer films. And they talk about the author kind of laments the fact that a lot of times he would just have a small walk-on role, and they just talk a little bit about just what made him so good. The essay at the end really does this well, just his facial expressions. Even when he doesn't have dialogue, you give somebody a look, and then you learn about their character and about his character in about 10 seconds. Along the way, they talk about some other films that he's been in, and a lot of times these were sort of comedy-type films. Apparently, there were 4 films in a series called Saint Tinians, and he was in all 4. He played the same character in the second through the 4th. Apparently, those were popular. So I definitely would like to check some of those out. He did a lot of TV work, or a decent amount of TV work. Somebody else he crossed paths with early was James Mason, just as James Mason was transitioning from theater to film. So it was a very different kind of acting. And he just talks about, usually he got along very well with directors. He has very kind words to say. There were some overall, he was well-liked, well-respected. He almost got in a fist fight with Oliver Reed, which, he's probably who didn't almost get in a fist fight with Oliver Reed, but they really respected each other after that. He would just cross paths with a lot of different people. Sammy Davis Jr. came to visit the set of The Pirates of Blood Island and talked to Ripper about how much he loved horror films, and that was later confirmed when Sammy Davis met another Hammer actor and started gushing about Plague of Zombies, and which is funny because there were 2 other very famous actors right there, and Sammy just ignored them and wanted to talk about Plague of Zombies. And they talk about how, as Hammer had to transition away from the Gothic period pieces as the 70s began and continued, he had to do some TV, he had to do some different films. He did appear in Amicus' film Torture Garden, which was one of the few times, when you really think about it, he didn't really co-star with big-time American actors that often, but in that film, he got to co-star with Jack Palance and Burgess Meredith, so that was interesting for him. And, the author kind of makes the point that it's a shame, even in films like The Creeping Flesh, not the greatest film ever, with with Peter Cushing, for the 2 minutes he's on screen, he's great. So why not cast him in a larger role, like the assistant of Peter Cushing in that film. It's almost like mind-boggling, like why that didn't happen and why he continued to have a lot of roles that were only a minute or two in length. He was well liked, well appreciated. He did get to attend a reunion of sorts for Hammer actors, so that must have been like a kind of a capstone on his career. And he did attend some conventions, and whenever his name was brought up, it was met with applause. Christopher Lee even brought him up on stage once, and the fans went wild for that. So yeah, so I've got a lot more Michael Ripper films to watch, especially now after reading this book. If you're a fan of Hammer films, or just films in general, excellent book. Like I said, really good read, but a quick read. Michael Ripper Unmasked by Derek Pykett. Can't recommend it enough. And look for my video of the top 10, or maybe top 15, I'm not really sure, Michael Ripper roles in film. All right, later. Thanks.